Good morning, guys. Welcome to Tuesday and today's training. I'm excited to have you guys here. I'm Marshall Burtcher, and if you don't know me, if you're new to me, I help codependents rediscover their happiness after codependency by helping them heal from their love addiction, helping them discover their own value, voice, and vision, and create sustainable, happy relationships in their life. So today, we're actually going to do something kind of different. Before we get to it, I need to share this out to the community. So if you're on Facebook or you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, it's above. If you're on YouTube, it's below, but there is a link to the community, and this is where you can find safe haven, shelter, and guidance, and tools and support, and recreating your life post-narcissistic abuse, post-codependency. Help yourself go in deep into your own healing and make the healing that you've been seeking to happen. So let me I've got to get that shared out to the community this morning, because today we're going to be talking about a very important and powerful concept called intermittent reinforcement. And it is the reason you think things will change. And this is very, very important, especially when it comes to dealing with trauma bonding and love addiction. And to explain this and give this the punch it deserves, the clarity it deserves, I'm going to be, let's see, that desktop view. Oh, there we go, right there. So now you can see the slides. This is actually from class 1 of From Addiction to Connection. So over last week, the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about the SAD cycle and the EDD cycle. So SAD stands for seduction, abuse, discard. That's the external relationship you experience. The EDD cycle stands for euphoria, despair, or euphoria, distress, despair. That's the internal emotional cycle you go through when you're being put through the seduction, abuse, discard experience. And this creates a intermittent experience of hits of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. This is what gets us hooked on the narcissist. It's what gets us addicted. I'm going to show you how this works. So I'm just going to come here and switch over. There we go. So the cycle that creates this is called intermittent reinforcement. And here's what this looks like on a timeline. So you want to think about this over time, what's going on over time here. And so we have 3 specific things happening. We have the seduction response, the abuse response, and the discard response of the SAD cycle. What that does is, in the beginning, we get a lot of seduction, lots of attention, lots of grandiose claims, lots of gifts and lavishness and love, things like that. And this starts to wane a bit, and it moves into an abuse and discard experience, because they start to criticize us, they start to withdraw if we're bringing up complaints, they start to ignore us, they start to focus on other things, and it's like night and day difference kind of thing. So this pulls us down into this abuse and discard phases of the SAD cycle, and then they come back and we get a little more seduction in there, and then a little bit of abuse and a little bit of seduction, and this cycle just keeps going on and on and on. Does this look familiar as you're going through this, watching this? Yeah. Now, if this looks familiar, it's because you're going through the SAD cycle. And this is what this does to us emotionally. So it creates a nightmare of highs and lows that get us hooked on them. Because when we're going through this, we think things are working because we're attempting a repair, right? So I'm going to show you what this looks like emotionally. Kind of give this a little more clarity. So if I'm in the seduction phase, right, and then they start abusing me and going to discard, I'm also trying to fix things right here. And sometimes it looks like it works and pulls me up into the seduction phase, re-engages. That gives us this hint, this idea, this belief that we are actually making things work and that things can change. When in reality, what's going on is the narcissistic person just wants your supply. They got hungry. Your efforts didn't work. It's just because they got hungry. So these are false signals of power. What has to be understood here is that this happening is the deal breaker. Healthy relationships do not put people through abuse and discards. Period. They don't exist because they don't even think that way. Well, when we're going through this seesaw here, we're going through this emotionally through the EDD cycle. So let's go there and look at that. So we got the EDD cycle, which is euphoria, distress, and despair. And here's what it looks like when you compare the timeline of experiences with your emotional baseline. So you start getting seduced, so you become very euphoric, then the abuse happens, you start to feel despair, and you crash in, or you start to feel distress, and you crash in despair. Then the seduction happens again, so you feel a little more euphoria. Look at the distance. Look how high it is right there. Look at how the change is. This is where we're getting hooked. And then a little abuse, so we get a little despair, a little discard there. And then more seduction, so we get a bigger high. And then, gotta do this right. And then they abuse us and discard us. They discard us this time and then abuse us, and then that brings us down a little lower. And then they seduce us, so we get a little higher. And then they abuse us and we go deeper, and then higher, and then deeper, and higher, deeper, higher, deeper. This is the emotional seesaw of intermittent reinforcement and of the SAD and EDD cycles that are going on. Guys, this is why we think we can change things. This is also what drives us completely crazy. They have found in scientific studies, they have put mice through intermittent reinforcement. What the experiment was is that the mouse could push a button and they would get a reward sometimes, but not all the time. It was randomized, and it drove the mouse crazy. This is driving you crazy. This is what keeps you coming back to the button, trying to think that, okay, this worked last time, why isn't it working this time? You're unable to get control of the situation, and the reason why is because you're not actually fixing anything. What's going on is the narcissistic or abusive person is hungry, and so it appears to work this time. And so they get their supply by seducing you, and then they move right back into their real, actual, true baseline, which is the abuse discard component. See, the seduction is the bait. It's the glowy thing on the very ugly fish in the deep ocean to get you to come in and get hooked. And this is what creates this love addiction. The combination of intermittent reinforcement, the SAD cycle, and EDD, put those together and your brain is fixated on them. And this is why I created the From Addiction to Connection system, to help you break free of that. Because when I was going through it, it was hell. It was nauseous. It took, the depression, the collapse within, the physical pain, the mental obsession, the shakes. It was a literal detox, emotionally, mentally, and chemically, because I'd gone through that cycle up and up and up and up and up and down, and it driven me crazy. So Marissa says, I really love this cycle. Can I ask you if abuse includes emotional withdrawal, complete change of behavior? Yeah, that would be the abuse. Yeah. That is not, healthy people don't do that. They don't withdraw from you. They don't put you onto emotional eggshells. And the abuse component, that sounds a lot like withdrawal and neglect. So, they could have a very strong avoidance side, but the problem is if they're not addressing their avoidance side and they're not taking ownership of their withdrawal symptoms, they're in trouble. This cycle is very unhealthy. It's very, very bad for you and for them, and for your mind and for your body, because it's putting you into a cortisol response, an adrenalized response, in combination with oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin that gets you what's called fear love, and you can't actually trust the person, you can't actually bond to them. Instead, you're in a fawn freeze loop in your brain, and you're scared of them, so you fawn and you feel like that's love. Well, emotional shifts and obvious disinterest, this is a serious red flag here. That person's at a minimum emotionally unavailable. So I'd be really, really mindful about staying in that relationship, because they want you to chase, which helps them abdicate responsibility from showing up and leaning into connection. Now that's from an avoidant point of view. A person with what's called avoidant attachment disorder or avoidant attachment trauma will behave that way. A narcissist is going to come back and get you or want you to chase so that they get the sense of supply and importance with them. Not all avoidants are narcissistic, but most narcissistic individuals happen to be avoidant as well. But these are signals of very unavailable, unhealthy, emotionally unhealthy people, right? So they need to be in therapy working on that shit. Outside of a relationship, if you're dating them, if you're in like a committed relationship, married to them or something, then you guys need to be both in individualized counseling and therapy working on attachment trauma. So, well, abuse is usually going to make you feel a lot of shame. They're going to attack you. They're typically going to dismiss you. They're going to blame you for things. They're going to shame you. They're going to mock you. They will violate your boundaries. They don't care about boundaries. Abusive people don't. They feel entitled to you. Things like that. Now, if your partner has an emotional flashback, well, that's trauma talking. But I think that the foundation or the bare minimum is that people need to be working on their shit, right? They need to be resolving their codependency or their trauma so that they can relate better. And if they're not actively engaged in that in some therapeutic way, then the relationship isn't going to get better because there's nothing you or anybody else can do to make it easier on them. They've got to come in and do their own work. So that's kind of like when I'm dating, when I've been in relationships, and the relationship that I'm in, that's a prerequisite. What are you doing with your baggage? Because I'm doing my work, and I want to be in relationship with people who will proactively do their work as well. So that's my minimum, because that's made my life so much easier over the time. So yeah. But this intermittent reinforcement is really important, and it can happen in just even outside of narcissistic relationships. It can happen with emotionally unavailable or avoidant individuals, and that gets you hooked on this chase. It's a signal of emotional unavailability at a minimum. But you got to understand, guys, that you're not there to build tolerance to this. These are red flags, and red flags mean stop. The relationship's done. There isn't going forward until that person changes things. So that means you separate and you move on, especially if this is in a dating relationship. I don't believe dating deserves a high level of tolerance for these kind of behaviors. I think there should be a very low tolerance for it, and you should be more interested in engaging with people who are already doing their work and demonstrating through their behaviors their emotional availability and health, rather than trying to work it out with someone who is not already in that process and demonstrating those things. So, and now people who are working out their trauma and they're working out their challenges are going to be responsive to your concerns about what's going on. Unhealthy people who are not interested in that will take it defensively. They will not be responsive to it, and they will not own it effectively. I'm talking as a personal one, because I was an abusive asshole in the past. I've been there. And I had to take a lot of ownership, swallow a lot of glass, and really reform things for myself in order to show up healthy as my healthy, loving self. And I didn't deserve a relationship, especially a romantic relationship at the time. I had very loving, supportive friendships around me that supported me through that, but I had to work out my shit before I could be available to connect with others in a healthy way. So I'm a big fan of proactivity in our mental health and our emotional health when it comes to these things. And since I am proactive in it, and the people that I date have been proactive in it, when a flashback happens or some shit goes down, we know what we're going to do with it. We have a protocol, we have trust in that, and it's a very safe place for us. But again, if you're going through this in your relationship, you need to hit the brakes. You need to realize that this is not a healthy thing. Period. Healthy relationships do not behave this way. They have, let's see if I can do it. You guys might just get some custom martial art here. I need to look. I'm just going to add a slide. Okay. Yeah, alright. I'm going to delete that. Oh, and I don't have any way to draw it. Well, you won't get that art. But really what happens in this is you've got a calm baseline in healthy relationships. So it doesn't vary all that much. It's just this. It feels calm. It feels stable. It feels reliable. It feels kind. You're not walking on eggshells. It's predictable and safe. It's safe to bring up a conflict. It's safe to bring up a complaint. It's safe to voice yourself. It's safe to share yourself. It's relaxing. It's comforting. Healthy relationships do not put you through that seesaw. Okay? Now, the beginning of a relationship is going to have a bit of that seesaw depending on your attachment style and your previous history with relationships. But depending on how that... Now, again, I'm going to correct that. Beginnings of relationships might have euphoria and some fear, but they're not going to have abuse and discard in them. Okay? When they start out, they're not going to go into the abuse and discard phase because the person doesn't think or act that way. Okay? Abusive, narcissistic individuals think they're entitled. And the entitlement says, hey, I'm in pain, so you should be too. So it's the lack of empathy that's profoundly involved in this that means that something is really, really important to understand. Because if they lack empathy, then they will fill that space with the entitlement that they have the right to put other people in pain when they're in pain. Because they can't stand the idea that someone else is better than they are. They have a superiority complex because of their inferiority complex. Okay, so it's called narcissistic inflation. So I want you to I'm just going to pinpoint that again, guys. If you're going through this seesaw, or you've been through it in your past relationships, and you're wondering why you keep chasing them, why you think things are going to change this time, why you're hooked on them, you're craved on them, it's because of this intermittent reinforcement. And in the From Addiction to Connection course, this is how we resolve it. Okay, I call it demagnetization, where we start to orient our point of view back to the pain and understand that the pain is the truth, the euphoria is the fantasy. Okay, pain is reality, euphoria is fantasy. And train our brain to associate that person with the actual reality, which is the pain of the abuse and the discard. What this does is it stops the cycle. And we're going to go through a detox. I'm not going to shine rainbows on this. This is a difficult process. But on the other side of it is your freedom. It's your peace. It's connection. And that's what From Addiction to Connection is designed to help you accomplish. Help you achieve sanity, create sanity again so you know what's really going on, create peace, help you regulate that nervous system, help you regulate what's called attachment distress. We'll talk about that more in the next training. So that you're more calm, more centered, more focused, and help create connection with yourself, so we heal what's called internalized loneliness, connection with others, so we can have relational companionship, so we heal or resolve relational loneliness, and fundamentally we start to nurture our needs, so we don't need to go through this cycle anymore. Instead, we become more and more normalized and secure in the experience of being connected with people, having our needs met, so we don't need to monopolize our lives around the narcissist. Instead, we've got a secure network of people who have our back, that love us and care about who we are and our well-being. That way we can build healthy, functional relationships from that foundation. We won't be suckered into or drawn into a narcissistic relationship because we're hungry, we're lonely, we're starving, we're insecure, we're vulnerable in some way. So be mindful of that, okay, guys? Now, Addiction to Connection, the From Addiction to Connection course is open for enrollment. You can click the link below if you're on Facebook, or above on Facebook, below on YouTube, and hop in, because I only teach this once a year. It's 8 weeks long, and that's where I teach you how to bring sanity back to your reality, accomplish more peace, create more peace in your reality, and reconnect with yourself and others. And that's the whole point, because that's what resolves love addiction. So I invite you to join me, and we start June 28th. So this is your chance to work with me. If you're looking for that, this is your chance to get that one-on-one. Well, it's a live group work, but it's your chance to work with me, and I'd be excited and honored to have you a part of that. So you can click the link below on YouTube and above on Facebook and learn more about how to jump into that. Guys, I appreciate you. Be mindful of this cycle. If it's happening anywhere in your relationship, you want to hit the brakes on that relationship, and you want to start to assess whether or not you're being abused, and discarded deliberately, or if this is a covert action. You're going to want to confront the person and say, hey, I think we need therapy because this up and down cycle is a little much, and get reconnected get reconnected back to yourself and back to your value, back to your sanity at a minimum. And this course, the From Addiction to Connection system, will absolutely help you accomplish that in tandem with any kind of therapy you do. Okay? I appreciate you guys. I've got your back in liberating yourself from codependency and rediscovering your happiness. I hope to see you in the course. Keep you guys safe out there. And remember that you're worth knowing, loving, and keeping. And I'll see you in our next training. Bye-bye, guys.